Good evening. Welcome to Metro Community College. My name is Kay Friesen. I'm the Vice President of Operations for the college. I'm always pleased to be part of events like this at Metro that bring people together to celebrate the arts, culture, and the humanities. And tonight is one of those nights where we get to welcome the National Book Foundation, their foundation's program that showcases some of the best literature published in the U.S. MCC is pleased to host tonight and be supported by community partners such as the Omaha Public Library, UNO English Department, and the Bookworm. I had the opportunity to briefly meet our special guests tonight before we started, and you're in for a treat. So sit back and enjoy. Thank you for being here, and enjoy the evening.
Thank you so much, Kay, for that warm welcome. Hi, everyone. I'm Natalie Green. I'm the Director of Programs and Partnerships at the National Book Foundation, and I'm thrilled to join Metropolitan Community College in welcoming you to Science and Literature Fighting Extinction. My utmost gratitude to the whole MCC team, especially Chad and Liz Kay. Liz has been answering my emails for upwards of 4 to 5 years at this point. And is just, as you know and love her, the truest of rock stars and such a testament to bringing books and literature out into the world and connecting them with readers. So I'm just so grateful to her. You might know the National Book Foundation as the presenter of the National Book Awards. We work year-round connecting readers of all ages with exceptional books and writers. Science and Literature is our newest prize, now in its 4th year, where we recognize 3 books annually that intersect with science and technology across fiction, nonfiction, and poetry, with thanks to the support of the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation. We're so excited to get to celebrate this year's honoree in fiction, The Last Animal, with you here in Omaha. I cannot shut up about The Last Animal. How many of you guys have read it? Can I see a little hand raise? Look at that. Okay, if you haven't read it, I can't wait for you to read it. You're going to go outside, you're going to buy it, multiple copies maybe. You're going to give it to all your loved ones. It's just, oh my gosh, it's such a moving book, a timely book, and we're going to talk about it. To stay in touch with the National Book Foundation, please sign up for our email newsletter, which some of you might have seen floating around on a clipboard right outside these doors, so we can keep in touch and let you know about future events, our summer reading adventure, and this fall's 76th annual National Book Award season. For tonight's program, honoree Ramona Ausubel will give us a glimpse into her wondrous book with a reading, and join author and 2025 Science and Literature Committee member Dr. Beronda L. Montgomery in conversation. We'll save a bit of time at the end for your questions, and then we'll transition to our book signing again right outside these doors. Many thanks again to the Bookworm. We're so grateful to have copies both of Ramona and Beronda's books available for sale tonight. And now, without further ado, I'm delighted to introduce our very special guests. Ramona Ausubel is the national best-selling author of 5 books. That's a lot of books. Most recently, The Last Animal. She is the recipient of the Penn Center USA Literary Award for Fiction, the VCU Cable First Novelist Award, and has been a finalist for both the California and Colorado Book Awards and the New York Public Library Young Lions Fiction Award. Her work has been published in The New Yorker, The New York Times, The Paris Review Daily, One Story, Tin House, The Oxford American, Plowshares, and elsewhere. She is a professor at Colorado State University and lives in Boulder, Colorado with her family. And Beronda L. Montgomery, PhD, is a writer, science communicator, and researcher. She has spent 20 years in academia, God bless, most recently as VP for Academic Affairs, Dean, and Professor of Biology of Grinnell College. Dr. Montgomery is a fellow of the American Academy of Microbiology, the American Association for the Advancement of Science, the American Society of Plant Biologists, and the American Society for Biochemistry and Molecular Biology. Oh my gosh, these accomplished people. Dr. Montgomery has received multiple awards, including the Excellence in Diversity and Inclusion Award from the American Society of Plant Biologists and the 2023 Hutchinson Medal of the Chicago Horticultural Society. Dr. Montgomery is the author of Lessons from Plants and is at work on her second book, When Trees Testify. Enjoy the program.
Thank you, Natalie and Liz and all of you. I produced our reading series at Colorado State University for several years, so I know exactly how much work goes into an event like this, and I appreciate every single person who has put time into it. And all of you for being here. This is really such a treat to get to look out at a room full of readers. There is no more beautiful sight on earth. So I'm going to read just a little bit so you can kind of get a feel for the book. I'm going to read the first couple of paragraphs, and then I'll skip a little bit, but I'll explain to you what goes on in between. So, Chapter 1. In the age of extinction, 2 tag-along daughters traveled to the edge of the world with their mother to search the frozen earth for the bones of woolly mammoths. Eve was 15, reshaping herself more each day. Vera, just shy of 13, was a stubborn, straight line. Jane, their mother, was a graduate student in paleobiology. Their father had died 1 year before, plunged into a shock green mountain in a tiny car on a tiny road in Italy where he was doing research for an article. Now they were 3, girls, sad and angry and growing and trying. Mom, sad and angry and trying, hauling their bodies across the scoop of sky to get to a bare place, a lost place where ancient beasts had once roamed. Somehow, they hoped, this trip would be the beginning of a new road, gentler, ascending. Okay, so now we skip ahead. They go to Siberia. They're digging around in the permafrost for bones of woolly mammoths to collect for DNA samples so that they can try to reinvent the woolly mammoth, basically, using gene editing and CRISPR. But it's really boring. This is not how you want to spend your summer as a teenager. So the girls are wandering off and getting into a little bit of trouble. And one day they go for a walk down the beach and disappear for a very long time. They're mad, they're frustrated, and they start digging at the cliff. Eve kicked and hit something hard. Shit, she said. She hopped and said, my toe bones are pulsing. Vera, meanwhile, dug at the hard spot. It was not rock, not wood. Bone. Some ancient grass eater that had drowned, starved, been eaten. The 2 of them dug at it with sticks because wasn't that why they had come to this distant edge? The person I would like to drown is Todd. He's the postdoc on the trip. In his zipper pants. Vera did not want to admit that she had a crush on Todd. The first plausible crush. She said, totally, and nicked at the sand with her stick. What emerged was not bone. It was fleshy almost, like leather, and it had a few coarse hairs. What exactly is this? Eve asked. Something dead. Everything here is something dead. This was different, though. This was not another piece of decayed skeleton. They knew that protocol would be to get the adults and set up proper extraction practices. They might do damage to a vulnerable specimen. But it was sure to be nothing, another juvenile discovery brushed aside by those in the know. I feel like digging, Eve said. So they dug. Eve dug in one direction and Vera dug in the other, and the thing was long and as thick as a small tree trunk. It had pores and skin, and it had fur. Vera came to a curve and followed the shape downward until she found the end where there was an opening. It's a trunk, she said. Evie, it's a trunk. They dug faster, both on Eve's side, hoping the trunk was attached to a body, a whole mammoth frozen upright in this spot. If there is a body, we should get help, Eve said. But when the trunk ended more quickly than they expected, and the body attached was small, and they realized it was a frozen baby, it felt like a rescue mission more than a discovery, and they did not stop, but dug until their fingers were soaked and frozen. It was perfect. It was sad and beautiful and perfect, the size of a large dog. Pull, Eve said, and they reached their arms around the back. Vera on the front end and Eve on the rear, and they hugged it, this cold body, and they pulled hard, bracing against the cliffside until it came free with a sucking sound, and both girls fell over backward. The mammoth smelled of the beginnings of rot. It was starting to thaw. Vera pushed it off herself and stood. She was elated and disgusted, and there was a rampage in her chest. "Is this happening?" she asked. It looked like the animal might at any time open its big eyes. Stop there.
Thank you. That was perfect. So it's such an honor to be here. I don't even think I've shared this with Natalie, but the National Book Foundation and the National Book Awards are like the Academy Awards for me, like the Academy Awards are for other people. There's a party, there's snacks. It's really big. Yes, it's really big. So when I was invited to be a part of the committee, it was a no-brainer. And it was a no-brainer when I was asked to be here today. I was never as happy to drive over to Omaha from Des Moines. I think that this science and literature, we were talking about this a little bit. The goal of it, according to me, not speaking on behalf of the National Book Foundation, but is really to find that intersection of beautiful literature, but authentic science, just getting people excited about authentic science. And you did it so beautifully that I was convinced you had been a scientist at some point in your life and that you then went on to get an MFA, but you tell me that's not true. Can you share a little bit with us about how you came to this beautiful intersection of science and literature in the context of the mammoth?
Yes, thank you for being here with me, Beronda. It's such an honor. No, I've never been a scientist. I've always been really interested in science as an idea. Like, I am not a perfectionist, so being the person with in the lab with the beakers and the numbers and the math is not a good role for me, because I'm like, yeah, that feels good. That feels about right. Don't you love that? I love that. Let's move on. But I feel like there's this crossover in the Venn diagram between writing and science, which is the what if. It's like the imagination is so important in both of these worlds, because you have to ask, what could happen? What could we make? And then I go off and I make things up, and the scientists go off and test and do procedures, and bless their hearts. It's great. But I like my making it up version a lot. When it was like 2014, I had a little tiny baby. She just fallen asleep on my chest. I had a novel draft due that was not this book. I opened my laptop. She was like in her little snuggly on my chest, and a story popped up about scientists working to de-extinct the woolly mammoth. And I thought, wait, really? Like, that's something we're gonna do? Because it felt at once like tender and sweet that this, here we are replacing something that we ourselves helped to disappear. And woolly mammoths are undeniably adorable. They're like the golden doodle of pachyderms. You wanna hug one, you know you do. And it's also an incredibly expensive and complicated process when we have an infinite number of things right in front of us that we should be taking care of and are not taking very good care of. So it felt like that perfect place of hubris, ignoring things that are easier and going for this expensive, sexy thing, and also a little bit of sweetness. So I was like, that's the territory of a novel. So yes. I kind of filed it away. And then a few years later, went to the La Brea Tar Pits in Los Angeles, which is a great natural history museum, a spot where there's actual tar in the ground and a bunch of creatures got stuck in it. So there's bones of those creatures. And then they also have a whole laboratory behind glass that you can watch the paleontologists working, brushing the little bones and reassembling everything. And that mammoth kind of reappeared in my mind. And I just wondered what it would be like to be the person responsible for that life that has both never existed before and is a version of a sort of a semi-imaginary version of something that we used to know very well as a species.
Well, I just think you did such a lovely job of capturing the science that I think you would have gotten an interview for a job in the lab if you had wanted one. But I think what else you captured, even in this passage that you read when Eve and Vera are finding the mammoth, is that there is this moment in science when you're doing research where you're the only one in the world that knows this thing until you're able to share it with someone. And so that was lovely how you captured that. I think one of the other things that I really enjoyed that I thought you brought to the forefront was the kind of gender dynamics that happen in science. And I think of it of kind of multifaceted ways that you engage it, right? So we see it when Jane is being dismissed in a way by her colleagues. But I love that there was another layer of it that you brought forward, and that's the fact that Jane was experiencing this in the presence of her daughters. So at one point you talk about how she is both navigating we call it microaggressions. They feel very macro when you're going through them. She's navigating that, but she's simultaneously navigating the humiliation of kind of experiencing this in front of her daughters. Can you talk a little bit about how you explored the gender dynamics? Because you hit it right on head. I was triggered at one point, I tell you. I was like, oh, this is good writing when you trigger.
Apologies for that.
That's okay. I have a therapist. We work through it.
That's good. I know. We all need that therapist to work through exactly that thing. Yeah, I had done a lot of research about gender dynamics in the sciences, but I also have felt it. I work in academia, and I work in a really wonderful English department, but I still feel those things, the ways that the female colleagues and I end up taking on a lot more student stuff, all the stuff that gets is like invisible. It just happens. Students come to me. They don't come to the person in the office next door who happens to be a man as much. And the way that people are spoken to is different. So I was thinking about it as I was noticing in my own life and in other professional settings and doing research. And then I also felt like one of the things that we don't see the work that women are doing a lot of the time. It gets sort of hid behind in those private spaces. Mm-hmm. So I knew that in the novel that was going to be the project, that the scientist in question was going to be a woman, and she was going to be in a low position of power. She's a postdoc. She's not anybody with any kind of social capital in the lab. Nobody needs to listen to her, and so they don't. But she's going to be the one that ends up with this possibility in her hands. But I also was really interested in not just having it be like an A-B sort of black-white situation, and that for that generational difference that I noticed between me and my mom and me and my daughter, where things that my mom was like, no, that's just how it is. You kind of have to find a side door. You can't go through the front. Nobody's going to let you in the front of that situation. You got to find a side door to the situation. And I was like, forget that. That's not okay with me. I'm not doing that. I'm going to break the door down. And even things where I noticed myself sort of thinking to my daughter, like, don't worry about it. Just like find that sort of like, maybe it's not all the way on the side, but it's like on the corner this time. And she's like, no, that's okay. I'm just going to walk in. That I was really interested in that, and really interested in the way that anger and disappointment and shame are like playing into that in different ways in the generations and between the two sisters.
I love that. I love that the book has so many things, and when I'm reading, I love to just write down adjectives as I'm reading. So I had their social commentary, right? Because you are making some social commentary on mother-daughter relationships, on science, gender. It's serious at times. I find it quite funny at times, charismatic, but it's also adventurous. And we talked about, I think you mentioned it last night when we were chatting, that you wrote this during the pandemic. Can you talk a little bit about how writing in the pandemic kind of led into your leaning into some of those ways in which I describe it, if those might not be the ways you would describe it?
Oh, I would definitely describe it that way. Yeah. So I started it. I had those things filed away from earlier, and then we moved to Colorado from California, and I was like, okay, it's time to write that novel now. So I got going in the fall of 2019, and I sort of was, gently entering. And just as I was really getting going with it, the pandemic started. All things went away. And there I was in my little backyard writing shack, and there was nothing. The world had disappeared, and I was so hungry for it. I felt like this book, this project that I was working on, I didn't know what it was going to turn into, was my passage out. So I wanted to write about Iceland. I wanted to write about Lake Como. I wanted to write about Berkeley, where I had left. I felt like it was like so deeply important to make those moves, but also as a sort of for the possibility that they represented, the way we have that incredible imagination. That's one of the things that I think makes our species special, is that we can imagine our way out of the little space that we're in, and we can make possibilities exist through that. So it was both like, for me as a writer at the moment, being like, please can we picture that lovely Icelandic fjord with the little like hand-built house that I stayed in one time. And that became part of the book because I wanted to hang out there, but also because I was really interested in the way that what if and that sort of like imaginative travel has real results in the world. Sometimes it's changes in our lives, and sometimes it's a creature that you're like, you just keep pushing that what if until you are holding a baby woolly mammoth all of a sudden, and you're like, oh, snap, I gotta feed this thing. I don't know how that works.
How did I get here? So one of the other kind of themes throughout the book, of course, is sisterhood and motherhood. And you dedicated the book to your mother and your sister. And we both kind of talked a little bit about being sisters. Can you tell us some about that through line of sisterhood and motherhood and how you see it as a core part of the book?
Yeah. So I grew up with a single mom and a much younger sister. So I was kind of had a sort of parenting role when my sister was real small. I was the person who could get her to eat. I was the person who could get her dressed. She didn't like other people doing things, but I could like sort of like find some magical trick for it. And it felt sort of like the world got remade for me once she was born in a really good way. And it was very much a threesome. We were a group of three in a way that I've never been a group of threes. Well, except for I was a group of three until my second child was born. Then it was the same sort of that, like, really the triangle is the most powerful, strongest shape in like geometry. You've got a triangle, you can put a lot of weight on that triangle. So I thought about that a lot, the way that they are each in that sort of connected space together and really depending on each other at the same time that they are trying to grow out of the triangle. Especially Eve, is the older daughter, thinks she wants anyway, to grow up and grow out of that triangle. And Vera, the younger daughter, feels very aligned with it, especially sort of the line between her and her sister. And to lose that is the scariest of all possibilities, much scarier than an extinct creature, much scarier than her mom kind of falling apart. Eve is her, like, the thing that roots her to the world. And Jane is growing out of it by accident because she has this new creature that she's caring for. So her shape has sort of shifted over the course of the novel. Yeah, so I was thinking a lot about that triangle shape and feeling so grateful for my mom and my sister for being that with me, which we really still are in a lot of ways. And I think, yeah, it feels like it's like sort of ingrained in my chemistry in a really important way.
Yeah, it's really beautiful, the way that you talk about it, but also the way it shows up where, as I read it, the sisters are very different, but very complementary. Eve is, I think, kind of resigned to disaster so let's have fun while the disaster comes. Vera is very hopeful with realism, but I love the way you talked about how Vera was kind of rooted in Eve. So I am a younger sister. I'm the youngest of 5, but the sister who's 3 years older than me, we're best friends. And I call her and my son my day ones, right? She was there from my day one, has been taking care of me with great consternation for all these years. But you wrote something that when I read it, I called my sister and I had to read it to her because it felt so much like the thing that I would say about her. And so it's Vera speaking. She said her own sister was 2 years older, doting and tender, never far away. It had been the gift. Vera had never lived without her sister. The story their mother told was of Eve, bedside after the birth of her sister, in the big armchair waiting to hold the baby. Yelling into their father, took the swaddled bundle out of their mother's arms and placed it in her own. Eve was Vera's place. They both knew this. And I called my sister, and I'm not even a crier, and we cried, right? Because Renee is my place, and I've known this. And so it's always so beautiful when an experience of yours shows up somewhere else in the world. So I just had to read that to you because it was such a moment. And she said, "What is wrong with you?" I said, "You're my place." And Ramona has helped us understand that you're my place. And so I just had to read that to you because I think you see it throughout the book. But there are these people in the world. I'm a plant scientist. There has to be something with plants. But like we're rooted in them. And it's beautiful how you capture that. And I think many of us experiences, whether it's with a sister, it's not always a sister, but there are many of us who have this person in our life who we understand that they're our place. And I always understand that I love my parents and my other siblings dearly. But if I can get back to Renee, all is right in the world. And then I had a son, and he's like my other place. Oh, this is becoming about me. I'm sorry. But this is what you triggered. And I think that's the beauty of writing, right? When there are these universal experiences that show up. And so I had to share that with you. And so Renee and I will forever think of you for us understanding that she's my place.
No, I love that so much. Please tell Renee that
I will tell her. She would have been watching if I knew it was streaming, but by the time I told her it was streaming, she had plans. So here we are. The other thing that I love is the camaraderie that you capture in their fortunately game, right? And we all kind of have these moments, and it's so lovely how that kind of shows up peppered throughout as well. So just, it's beautiful the way in which the sisterhood theme is really quite strong. I think that one of the things that I also kind of wanted to touch on is that I think it was in one of the passages that you read, is that I love how there's this serious science, there's this serious kind of calling us, maybe in a quiet way, but it was loud to me to think about climate change and other kinds of impacts on the world and fighting extinction. And I think we can fight extinctions of many kinds. But I think that then it's mixed in with like teen crushes and, family angst. And I thought it was really quite lovely. It's a difficult thing to do that. Like, does it just come natural to you? How do you think about pulling these different parts together as a writer?
That is a good and hard question. I think it's part of what I really pay attention to, because partly like to survive, to feel like I can be present in the world, I have to try to stay awake to the beautiful things that are happening all around me, and they're happening all around me all the time. I think as you were talking about the sibling stuff, in that part where I was like, I'd get my 2-hour stretch. It's like early COVID. We're homeschooling 2 kids in like pre-K and second grade, and like time is suddenly a very different reality. So I would get my little window to rush into the backyard studio and work. And I would look out my window, and my 2 kids were they just completely disappeared into a different reality. And they needed a lot of food, constant snacks, and there were so many dishes. But they otherwise sort of retreated from the universe in which I lived. They had a golf tee that they'd found somewhere. None of us golf. I don't know where this came from. And a ball, a bigger ball, and then a whole bunch of other random crap that they gathered, and they just went into the yard and invented a universe. They were like, bye. There was an enemy. His name was Duttler. You did not want to mess with Duttler. He was sometimes a potato. I don't know. There was a whole thing. But I felt like I was watching them, and they felt so important to me that they had each other, and that beauty of the thing that they could hold up the imagined world together. So I think that's part of why the sibling relationship is so strong in this, thinking about my sister, but also watching them and watching them be each other's it's going to be okay place. Yes. Yeah. And I don't know, I think it's essential to my nature to be wanting to pay attention to both things, to want to acknowledge the really deep, hard things that we are looking at, that we are seeing, that are part of our lives, and to not forget the beautiful, funny, weird stuff that's also happening. I just taught a class this semester called Creative Writing as Transformative Practice, and at the beginning of the semester I was like, uh-oh, what if we don't transform? What if we read and write and nothing happens? But we soldiered off. We went to the art museum. We went to the biology specimen lab, which is full of all kinds of crazy taxidermy things. We had the CSU bug zoo came to our class. That was a great day. We looked at art. We did all kinds of things. And in one section of the class, we were paying attention to delight. So we read Ross Gay's The Book of Delights, which if you haven't read is a really, really wonderful book. And their task for the month was to just pay attention to things that delighted them and to keep track of them. And one day, it was a beautiful day, early March, it was prettier than it should be. I was like, we don't need to be in this building. Everybody go outside and find something to be delighted by. And they came back in half an hour later, and one woman was like, so I was sitting on the grass outside the building, and a professor in their entire class came out of the education building and did cartwheels. Did you plan that? I'm like, I did not plan that. That is just the truth. That's yes. True too. There's all the things that are happening in the world right now. There's so much weight we're all carrying and so much sadness. And there is still a random group of people doing cartwheels on the day I sent them outside to be delighted. That's all there. So I feel like that's part of the project of this book, is to say yes to both things.
I love that. It's so incredibly important. I have been having the experience that I hope some of you will have, where you raise a child that's delightful to the world, and sometimes they turn on you a little bit, and it's okay, right? Because you've raised them to be this thoughtful, and so I was having a day where I was kind of overwhelmed and down, and my son sent me pictures of some kids from Sudan where there's war. They were playing in the field that had been destroyed by war, and he said, you don't get to be sad sitting in your nice house on the river when this is happening in the world. And I said, you have been well raised, right? He said, okay, you're now just complimenting yourself. But I think that, so your dad helped, but I think that your point is that we have to fight for joy. And joy is an important part of our lives, even when it's in the midst of the world. So I love the teen crush in the middle of like disaster. It was really, really quite lovely. One of the other things, I wanted to read you something else that I read in the middle of the book. Part of my life practice is to find life lessons in the middle of everything, which is how I find them in plants and in other places. But there was a quote in here that I thought, what a beautiful life lesson. I sent it to my son, and I wrote down the quote, and I was trying to remember the context. I don't even remember the context now, but it says that the fantasy is always better before it becomes true. That's a life truth. And I just thought that is really something for us to think about in a lot of different contexts. You wrote that in a lot of different other contexts, but just reflecting that back to you, what would you share with us about those words that are yours, and I think a gift to us in the context of The Last Animal, but also a life truth? Yeah.
Thanks for pulling that out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think in that that is also a really essential piece. I think about before I wanted to be a writer. I was a really shy kid. I had one friend, exactly one friend. Phoebe, she was the best. We're still really close. But everybody else thought I was very strange. I was not good at chatting. I didn't understand how any sports worked. I was just doing my own thing. And then this poet came to our class in the 6th grade and taught us poetry. And I was, first of all, better at it than everybody else. And that had never happened. And also, miraculously, I said a thing that was true for me, and these people who otherwise were huh, what was she? Got it. It landed for them, and it made sense, and they understood something. And I thought, this is a very amazing technology. I've just learned something important, and I'm gonna maybe stick close to this. So I kept writing, and I wrote in high school, and I wrote in college, and I had this fantasy about what it would be like to be a writer, and that it was all about the finished products all the time. I imagined book covers. I imagined, the moment you turn something in and it's victorious and everybody loves it and raves, and it's on the front page of the New York Times Book Review, and it's a bestseller instantly, and all those things. That's the stuff that I would sort of catch on as the glittery mountain on the hill, magical place. But what I have learned as a writer is that the pleasure is all in the doing. That moment at the end, it's really nice. It's super sweet. This is amazing. I am so glad to be in this room with you all. And tomorrow, I will wake up again, and you will have gone back to your lives, and nobody will be giving me amazing snacks. And I will be back to work, which is actually the best part, that it feels like the doing, being in the middle of it, learning a thing over years, being in the dark of a story that I do not yet understand, but I'm finding my way through, is an incredible privilege. So lucky, and I learned so much about myself, about the world, about the person that I want to be. And that's it. That's what I want to keep doing. I want this so that I get to keep doing that.
I love that. I think you've convinced me then that this is sometimes not true. The fantasy isn't always better, right? Because this moment, I hope that's not true, because this is an amazing book that you have gifted us with, and I hope that the fantasy wasn't even as good as this has all been, because it's just been amazing. I think the last question I wanted to ask you before we turn to the audience, so you can start to get your questions ready. As a writer, and with other writers that I've talked to, sometimes we kind of have this idea of what's going to resonate about the book, and then you go out there in the world with the book and you're surprised. What have you been surprised about in terms of people's response to this that you might not have imagined?
Good question. Oh, I was really scared that because I'm not a scientist, that somebody would find out that I wasn't a scientist and I had no business writing
I was about to
this.
hire you.
See, you guys, I got a job. I'm so proud. Yeah, but I was scared. It's scary to go out there with something that is so much about a world that you don't belong to. So I felt like people were probably going to just like, you know, send me off and be like, listen, little writer lady, what do you know about any of this? Go away. I also worried that it would be that sort of mark of the brightness and humor and like current life force that is being experienced, especially by the two girls, would not feel serious enough. That people would not take the serious part of the book seriously because there was this other thread. And that has been a lovely surprise to feel like that life force is part of what makes the other piece true. And that we're all in that, even when we're thinking about reading the news and feeling that despair that I'm sure many people in this room feel often. That doesn't change what happens when you see a cute dog or have a child make you laugh or fall in love with a plant or whatever the zillions of things that happen to you, that was more intrinsically true for more people than I had expected.
Well, I just want to say, as we're turning to the audience, I think that I wanted to congratulate you again on the Science Plus Literature Award. As I said to you, this is an exemplary work sitting in that, and I know you've gotten other awards. We are thankful for your writing. I'm really thankful personally to have had the chance to meet you in person and to be in conversation, and we look forward to seeing what the audience has to ask of you.
Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Beronda.
Thank you.
Natalie is coming to get the mic. She's going to be the roving microphone. The first question is always so hard. Yeah.
So the chapters, obviously, what pushes you to like, keep writing and keep working on a novel and just pushing the chapters out as they go?
That is the biggest question. Such a good one. Let's see. I think I really genuinely enjoy parts of the process. So some of it is being learning that I love being in that middle and being less scared of the middle and less focused on the end. So trying to actually enjoy being sort of in the woods of the thing. I guess maybe I do still really care about finishing though, because I do find that motivating to be like, I'm gonna keep doing this and I'm gonna get through it. When I was writing my first novel, I was in graduate school. I had come to graduate school from being a poet. So I started in an MFA in fiction as a poet, having basically written like enough pages of prose to get into graduate school, and that's all. So I didn't know anything. The first workshop, we were sitting at this table, all these amazing writers. Somebody's like, this is really lovely sentences. It's great. I love this image. It's interesting that there's no plot. And I was like, oh, plot, you say? Noted. So I had like everything to learn. But I think I wanted to learn it and I really wanted to work on it. So when I was working on that first novel, I wrote it really fast. That's one of my most useful tools for getting through a draft, is to carve out a section of time and move at a clip where the logical part of my brain that says, you can't do this, you don't know what you're doing, doesn't have time to enter the picture. It's like, we don't have time for that because I am writing 1,000 words a day, 5 pages a day, 10 pages a day for that first novel is what I did. Whatever it is, I just am working, not worrying about that right now. And that really helps me to sort of let all of those questions go and let all of that, like, will I ever finish? How long is this going to take? Am I going to be 140 years old when I finish this? Like, maybe. We don't know that yet. All we're doing is doing today's work. That feels really freeing. And then I get to enjoy being in the middle of it, which is great. Yeah. Thank you. We have one over here.
So you talked about your first book, how you wrote, like 5,000 words, 5 chapters, 10 chapters. How has your process of writing changed over each book?
Good question. It's totally different if I'm working on short stories or long form, because short stories are just much less terrifying. They're so small. It's like a little friend. I feel like that first novel, when I was working on that novel, and it was so scary, and I definitely did not believe that I was capable of doing it. I would sometimes take a break and write a short story as like I felt like I was like getting on a little like unicorn floaty in the pool. The short story was a unicorn floaty, and I was gonna hang out there for a little while and get a sunburn, and then I was gonna like dive back into the ocean of the novel. So it depends. In that case, they're really different from each other. But so the first novel, I was in grad school and I had a fair amount of time. I was like busy, but like in a particular way. The second novel, I had a 1-year-old child and I had less time. So I did, instead of writing 10 pages a day, I wrote 5 pages a day, which is still really a lot, but it was a lot less than 10. But the third novel, this one, when I was sitting down to do this, I had 2 kids and a full-time job, like a very full-time job. And I was like, I don't think 5 pages a day is happening. So I invented this thing that I think of as the half draft. So it's not the beginning or the end. It's the foundation half. So it has a beginning, middle, and an end. But instead of aiming for a draft that's like 250 pages, I'm aiming for a draft that's like 100 pages. And it has the DNA of the whole project woven throughout, but it's like thinner thread count. I can skip a scene if I'm not sure what that scene needs to be. I can sort of like sketch something in, and it was really much less scary and much easier. So that, I'll never give that up now. That is like now totally part of how I'm gonna do it because it made such a huge difference. And then when I came back for the second draft, I knew a lot more about what I wanted the story to be because I'd written my way all the way through it. So I could write those in between places, fill in the places that I'd skipped around, thicken it up, sort of like bring characters up who I realized had been important. Yeah, and it was really great. So that part of the process has completely changed, and I will never give that up. Yeah. There's one in the front, Natalie.
Do you see AI threatening writing?
Oh, more genre writing. Do you agree? Like, I think like really formulaic books that are meant, the whole point of them is it's a formula, that's the comfort. I think there is a lot of threat there because you can kind of teach the machine to do the thing. In a way, we have to turn ourselves into a kind of machine to do them. I feel less afraid for literary fiction and anything that is about the human experience, which is the one thing that the machines cannot ever do, right? They cannot say what it feels like to be a person. And I think we will take a lot of refuge in that as humans as we move into like a more, all the technologies that we cannot even yet imagine. The fact of being able to connect and understand each other through art and literature is gonna matter as much or more as it always has. And we're gonna want to feel like some like living, breathing, warm-blooded person made something and said something and we can receive it. So maybe a threat, but also like maybe it's gonna amplify how important it is to do what we do as readers and writers.
Okay, the front is really standing out right now. No pressure to the folks in the back.
As a writer, how do you end your story? Do you have a conclusion in your head beforehand, or do you end the story as you write away?
I love that question. It really depends. This one I kind of knew what would happen in the end. I had a pretty clear picture of them, of what happens at the very end, this like image of that. I didn't know at all how I was gonna get there, and that changed drastically. There were like versions of the plot where there's like a car chase, like a whole bunch of possibilities, but I kind of knew where I was aiming. I guess that happens to me probably, I would say like maybe half the time, where I sort of have a sense of what that final image. And the other half of the time, I probably have a sense of either an early image or a middle image that is sort of that I'm moving toward. In an early version of this, in that question about how my practice has changed, another thing that I did, because I don't like to outline, I can't write, if I write an outline, I get immediately very bored. Now I'm just like checking off boxes. Who wants to do that? That is not interesting to me. So I can't, but it also means that I can't like organize ahead, which does cause some problems. So I came up with this other idea, which is that I would have sort of images for each section of the story, sometimes just for a chapter, sometimes for whole sections. And in the early part, when I really didn't know, I like the fine grain even of a chapter was too close. I drew, I'm not a good drawer, but I drew and pasted up above my desk an image for the beginning of the book, which is a little bit after the scene that you heard, which is the two girls sitting on a pile of dug up bones, drinking stolen vodka and talking about mall air conditioning. So I was like, that is my opening image. When I picture that, I remember everything that matters about the beginning of the book. In the middle, it was an image about where the mammoth has been born and she's not well and she's making a lot of noise and seems really uncomfortable. And Vera, the younger daughter, has this idea to hang a sheet and project a movie of the Pleistocene to see if the mammoth will feel more at home. So that image of the three women watching and the mammoth watching this movie was the middle image, and I won't tell you the last image in case some of you haven't read it, and I don't want to spoil it. But that was really helpful to me to have those images to walk toward as I was moving. So even if I don't know what the ending is going to be or logistically how it's all going to come together, being able to picture those things kind of like drops me back into what matters in the story, and then I can reorient and move in that direction. Thank you for that question. We heard rumors about the back. Let's see what we can do.
I'm not sure if I count as the back, maybe representing the middle section here, but thank you for coming here. And I really personally like works of fiction that feature like strong themes of science and nature. So I'm looking forward to reading The Last Animal. Just wondering if you think those themes have become more prominent in modern times, or they've kind of just always been there, and then whether you think you'll come back to those themes in your future writing, or this was kind of singular to this book.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question about whether it's become more prominent. I feel like in some ways we have, because of climate change and because we are all really aware of the planet we live on in a way that maybe we weren't as a species a little while ago or a long while ago, that does feel like it's just like ingrained in our consciousness, and maybe there's more of that in writing, even when it's not writing about the climate. But I wonder, I feel like science has always been, the imagination and science are together, and there's that thing of like, what could we do with it? What would happen from everything from like Frankenstein to Jurassic Park, like all of these different versions of what could we do with the tools that we have? And the place of fiction to go past what we already know and what we already can do, and ask some of those questions and maybe get a little peek at some of the potential unintended consequences and maybe intended consequences. And as to whether I'll keep going, yeah, I definitely think this is going to be part of what I follow. Not every time and not always, but it does feel really, I don't know, there's a lot to it, and there's a lot of, I'm just curious about a lot of the things that we know how to do, and I'm curious about where we take things in like a very human way. So we take a tool and we do something with it that says a lot about our little species. Thanks. Yeah.
Hello. Thanks for coming. On that note, I was going to ask too, 10, 20 years ago, this was more science fiction, and now it's a reality. They are cloning mammals the mammoths as we speak, and it could potentially be here in 2 years. So can we expect maybe like a sequel or another more Jurassic Park-esque book from you then?
Perhaps, but isn't that wild that it's really happening? Yeah, we like those dire wolves that they, came out with a couple weeks ago. Those puppies were so cute. They're not really dire wolves because they're gene edited. They like took a wolf and plopped in all of the dire wolf traits that they knew about from specimens, but they look and act like dire wolves, and that's kind of amazing. And we will watch them grow up, and who knows what will happen to them. And they're going to do the exact same thing with mammoths. So. Yeah, in our lifetimes, we will see these creatures be born, and the idea is to release them in the place that is basically fictionally described in that section I read to you. There's a place called Pleistocene Park in Siberia, and the concept from this group that will be at the forefront of the mammoth production, because they've moved out of academia and it's much speedier in the private sector when you don't have peer review and such things to slow you down. So that company is. They're breeding the mammoths, they're gene editing and then raising the mammoths in their lab, and then they will release them in Pleistocene Park, and we will see what happens to them. And I just truly, we don't know. It's going to be like Jurassic Park is just going to happen to us. Hopefully with less like murdersome creatures, but we'll just have to see.
I think we have time for one more.
Hello. So, your book was assigned to me from my creative writing class, and I was just wondering, what advice would you give to new writers? Specifically, what advice would you give for new writers that are experiencing writer's block?
Great question, the ultimate question. Thank you for reading it, and thank you to your teacher for assigning it. I actually just wrote a whole book about this because this is a subject that I'm really interested in. So next April, there's going to be a whole book dedicated to exactly this question on getting unstuck and moving forward. But for right now, I think the most important piece, there maybe I'll say two. One is to just stay interested in your own work, to write what you actually want to write. Don't write the thing that you feel like Faulkner needed you to write. Don't write the thing that will impress some important person. Write from your real self. Write in your own voice and follow your interests in a true way. When I was in graduate school, Jim Shepard, who's a wonderful writer, came to visit us, and he said, follow your weird. And I think about that a lot. So follow your weird. The second thing is start small. So don't be like, I'm sitting down today, it's page 1 of my 900-page first novel that is the first novel in an 8-part series. Don't do that, because you will be like, I can't. Today, let's try tomorrow. I don't feel like I'm up for that today. So really reduce the size of the thing you're trying to do. If you write for 20 minutes every day, you will make progress. If you're stuck, you need the first step. It's because the first step is too big. So reduce the size and come back with some kind of steadiness, but follow your real desires.
Everybody's murmuring, taking notes from their craft talk. Thank you all so much for joining us. Can we give Ramona and Beronda a huge round of applause? Thanks to those who tuned in online, and thanks to you all for being here in person. It's so nice to see your faces. Just give us one quick moment, and then we're going to be right outside the doors for the book signing. If you haven't already grabbed copies of Lessons from Plants or The Last Animal, those are available for sale, with thanks again to the Bookworm. And thank you all so much. Have a lovely evening.
That was wonderful. Thank you. You had such good questions. I loved all of that.